The internet is full of great writing tips, but it can be difficult to figure out which ones will make an impact on your creative work. This was something that I struggled with. Hi there, my name is Brian Collins and welcome to the Become a Writer Today channel. So in this video, I'm not going to give you 99 crazy different tips to help you improve your writing. Instead, I'm going to describe how 4 different tips from different types of writers and sources changed how I think about writing and the craft itself. I've tried to put these tips into practice for my creative projects and for my writing business, Become a Writer Today, and I'll explain how they've helped. Hope you enjoy the content in this video. If you do, hit thumbs up, and of course if you want to get more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. A couple of years ago, I decided that I wanted to become a successful indie author. So I went onto Amazon and I looked at the best-selling books at the time. What did I find? Dozens of genre fiction books, murder mysteries, thrillers, and so on. So I said to myself, Brian, if you're going to become a successful indie author, you need to write books like this one. So I'd get up early in the morning and I'd put on a pair of noise-cancelling headphones, open up Scrivener or my writing application and try and write 500 words for a murder mystery. And I didn't really make much progress. It was only when I went on a story writing workshop to the west of Ireland and heard somebody speak. His name was Robert McKee, and he's the author of a series of excellent books about the craft, including story. He's also the person that studios like Pixar call when they're having problems with their scripts. At the end of the 2-day workshop, I was lucky enough to meet Robert. And I said, Robert, how can a writer figure out what they should write about? Because this was the big problem I was having at the time. And Robert said, go home and look at your library. A writer should write what they read. So when I went home and looked at my library, which in this case was a Kindle library and also the bookshelf in my office, there were dozens of books about blogging, copywriting, self-help, personal development, and so on. But there wasn't too many books about murder mysteries or genre fiction. And I quickly realized that I was trying to write in a genre that I didn't spend much time reading. And since then, I decided to focus less on writing fiction and more on writing non-fiction. And this led me to explore lots of different non-fiction genre books, and even to write a book about creativity and later a parenting memoir. Now, I'm not saying that you should write fiction or non-fiction or pick a particular genre, but if you're struggling to identify what to write about, then simply write what you love to read. The second piece of writing advice that fundamentally changed how I write comes from the master of the craft, Stephen King. He articulates this piece of advice in his seminal book, which everyone should have on their bookshelf. That book is called On Writing, and the advice: write with the door closed, rewrite with the door open. So when I used to write drafts of my short stories and later my blog posts and non-fiction, I try and get my sentences perfect and then my paragraphs and then the entire chapter. And I try and do this when I was writing that first draft. And inevitably this would mean I'd write a sentence or a paragraph and then I'd go back and rewrite it again and to repeat this exercise over and over. And I was never really getting into the habit of finishing my work. But to apply Stephen King's advice, if you write with the door closed, you don't worry about what it sounds like or the mistakes in your work. You're just simply trying to hit a word count or get the ideas out of your head and onto the blank page. And then later you can open that metaphorical door that Stephen is describing, and you can show that first draft to somebody in work, or perhaps to a friend, or perhaps to an editor or beta readers. This is the approach I took with my last book. I wrote all of the first and second drafts myself, and then later, when I felt like they were in a good place, I hired an editor who was able to point out issues in the work, and then I subsequently hired beta readers. And this approach helped me finish my book much faster than previous books. The third piece of writing advice that fundamentally changed how I write particularly applies to online writing and if you're writing about difficult topics. Run the Alien from Mars test. Let me explain. A couple of years ago, I was working as a journalist. Now, I wasn't a very good journalist, and I don't work as a journalist today, but I did get one piece of interesting advice from an editor of a local newspaper at the time. So I spent a couple of hours labouring over a news story about a local council meeting that was big news back in the day. And the editor kept pressing me for the article because I was late. I wasn't very good with deadlines back then. Eventually, I sent it over and went home. The next morning, he called me into the office early and he went through my piece. And basically he said, Brian, we couldn't publish this. It was too difficult to read and too hard to understand. And I asked him what did he mean. And then he went through all of the different sections in my article that were hard to understand and explained how they should be changed and edited. And then he said this to me: Brian, anytime you're writing an article like this about something technical or difficult, ask yourself, could an alien from Mars understand this? This is particularly useful today if you're writing about technical topics or if you're writing about difficult concepts. You may understand the concept in question, or perhaps you may feel like your reader understands the concept in question. But chances are, if you're writing for an online audience, then they need a little bit of an explainer or a little bit of context for whatever the topic is. Now, if you're unsure, you can always use a grammar checker, or you can use a reading level tool to figure out the reading level of your work in question. But don't be afraid to simplify and explain in everyday language all of those technical terms, jargon, and concepts that people may take for granted. The only real exception is if you're writing for an expert or an academic audience. Otherwise, readers will thank you if you're able to explain in everyday language and words the intention of your piece and provide some context and background. The fourth piece of writing advice that fundamentally changed how I think about the craft comes from the screenwriter David Mamet. He's written multiple award-winning plays and has directed and written films like Glengarry Glen Ross. Now, I've read lots of different interviews and books from David over the years about how he thinks about his craft. But one particular theme or tip really struck a chord with me. David said, do one thing for your art every day and do one thing for your business every day. So your art in this case, if you're watching this video, I'm going to assume it's writing. So if you do one thing every day for your craft, you're writing 500 words, or perhaps you're taking a writing course, you're doing something that's going to build your body of work. And then if you're doing one thing for your business every day, perhaps you're doing something which will help you earn a living as a writer. So that could be setting up an offer for readers, or perhaps it could be figuring out a new way to sell your books or to find new writing gigs or writing jobs. But whatever it is, if you're improving at your craft every day, and if you're also working a little bit on your business every day, then you're going to get better as a creative, and you're also going to get better as somebody who can earn a living from the written word. So I try to put this into practice all the time. In the morning, I'll typically try and do creative work. It could be outlining a video like this one, or it could be writing an article, or it could even be going through some writing courses that I've taken and figuring out some tips that I can put into practice. And then in the afternoon, I'll do things related to the business that I'm running, which has become a writer today. And that could figure out, or could involve figuring out who to hire next, what articles I should commission from other freelance writers, and if I should create a new type of course. And then if my business revenue goes up, this frees me up in the morning to work on other creative projects which may not necessarily add to the bottom line, but which are fun to work on. Those are the 4 different writing tips that changed how I think about writing. What tips have you come across over the years that have changed your craft? Let me know in the comments section below this video. And of course, if you want to get more advice like this about the craft of writing, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel.